The colony of Georgia was founded in 1732. It was the last of England's American colonies, and it was the only one founded in the 18th century. Georgia was created in the area of disputed land that lay between the colony of South Carolina and Spanish Florida. But more than a decade before the charter was even granted for the colony of Georgia, the British had staked their claim to the region by establishing Fort King George along the swampy banks of the Altamaha River. The purpose of this fort was to prevent the Spanish in Florida and the French in Louisiana from moving any closer to the Carolina colonies. Fort King George didn't last long because it cost the British government too much to operate, and so most of its troops were withdrawn after only 6 years. A royal charter for Georgia was granted by King George II, for whom it was named, to a group of men who shared a common humanitarian vision. They called themselves the Trustees for Establishing the Colony of Georgia in America. The leader of the trustees was a man named James Oglethorpe. He was a person who understood the importance of establishing strong defenses against the Spanish. But more importantly, Oglethorpe and the other trustees wanted the lands of Georgia to be used by impoverished English Protestants who had been locked up in debtors' prisons for being unable to pay their bills. The trustees wanted to turn Georgia into a place where hardworking, virtuous people could prosper on family farms. And so they made grants of only small amounts of land to prevent big plantations from being developed. They outlawed slavery in Georgia, not just for humanitarian reasons, but because they believed that the moral benefits of hard work would be lost if slavery was allowed. The trustees even banned the sale of rum, mainly because this alcoholic drink had been used as an item of trade in other colonies with American Indians, and its effect on them had been very destructive. In February 1733, a ship carrying James Oglethorpe and around 120 settlers sailed up the Savannah River, the river that formed the boundary between the colony of South Carolina and the new colony of Georgia. With the help of a friendly Native American, a site for Savannah, the new capital of Georgia, was purchased. The land they selected was situated on a low bluff overlooking the river about 10 miles upstream from the ocean. Oglethorpe oversaw the planning of the town, which he laid out in a distinctive style, made up of regularly spaced public squares surrounded by houses and public buildings.
Oglethorpe designed a town with public squares and wide boulevards. Indian chief Tomochichi and his tribe have welcomed the Georgia colonists and have helped them adapt to this new and strange land. The Native Americans seemed eager to trade, and some even have interest in Christianity.
For the first 10 years, Oglethorpe acted as the colony's governor, representing the trustees back in Britain, and he ruled without the help of a colonial legislature.
Amid the progress, there are rumors of discontent. Is everyone getting along within this community?
That's a question you'd have to ask my husband.
Mary Tate's husband and others were unwilling to say anything that would upset Oglethorpe, whom they call father. But there is grumbling about rum and slaves. Both are forbidden by the royal charter. The trustees fear that rum and slaves would encourage laziness in a plantation economy. But this wilderness is much more difficult to tame than had been anticipated. Slaves would ease that burden. In fact, we have evidence that some colonists are renting slaves from South Carolina plantation owners just across the river.
During its first 10 years as a colony, Georgia did not prosper. Few settlers had made the voyage to the Georgia shore, and about half of those that had come had done so at the trustees' expense. And the trustees' goal of turning it into a place where poor people could come to start new lives had been a failure. In fact, most Georgians felt that the trustees' rules were what was actually holding the colony back. Under the rules, Georgians couldn't develop large rice plantations like those in South Carolina or have slaves, couldn't buy rum, and had no voice in the colony's government. In other words, they wanted to see big changes made. Because the colonists were so unhappy with how things were going in Georgia, James Oglethorpe realized that his humanitarian dreams for the colony would never come true. And so, broke and feeling defeated, he returned to England and never came back again. In the years that followed his departure, the trustees' rules were changed, and in 1754, Georgia fell under the control of the king and became much more like the other southern colonies, a place where rum flowed freely and where slavery and large rice plantations flourished.
Slavery in Georgia is known to have been practiced by the original or earliest known inhabitants of the future colony of the state of Georgia for centuries prior to European colonization. During the colonial era, the practice of Indian slavery in Georgia soon became surpassed by industrial-scale plantation slavery. The colony of the province of Georgia under James Oglethorpe banned slavery in 1735. The only one of the 13 colonies to have done so. Georgia's non-profit trustees intended for the colony to rehabilitate and provide a second chance for former English debtors. Slave labor challenged those efforts. However, it was legalized by royal decree in 1751. This is by King George II, in part due to George Whitefield's support for the institution of slavery.